stage is yours.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me? Yes. Perfect. Hi. Yeah, so at the risk of being a bit controversial, I didn't come here in the first place for mass adoption. I came here for censorship resistance, permissionless, sort of like infrastructure for the world to build on. And today I'm going to talk about this and how we do it at on Ethereum. Okay. So wait, before, who is familiar with Fossil? Okay. Okay, great. Okay, so I'll take it from the start. Yeah, let me tell you the story of how Ethereum evolved over the years. First, it was all quite simple and beautiful. You had like this sort of like network of nodes that we call validators, and basically they would do a lot of tasks we wanted them to do for a bit of money, which was ETH. And what was actually nice is like all the nodes will do all the tasks we wanted them to do. So they would, take transactions, pack them into blocks, then send those blocks over to the rest of the network, and then they will also, receive blocks from other people and vote on it. What was kind of nice was that it was like all very unsophisticated. So you could have like very sort of like naive nodes with very low hardware and bandwidth consumption. And those naive nodes could do basically everything we wanted them to do, which was very nice. But then we had a problem, and that problem was called MEV. Okay, who's familiar with MEV, just so I know? Okay, nice. So yeah, briefly, MEV is basically about like reordering transactions in a block, and that allows you to extract more value from the block than you would if you just like ordered transactions naively. And so the problem with that is like you can get really, really good at it, and you can extract like a lot of value. If you get like a really sophisticated, you get like a very big advantage over like people that just like don't really know how to do it. And every time there is sophistication in the network, that's a risk for decentralization, because it basically means sophisticated players will just like construct very valuable blocks. They will get more money. They can invest in infrastructure to get even more valuable blocks. And this creates like a big difference between some validators and others, and that's a centralization risk, which we don't really want. And so the solution for it was to say, okay, so it was called proposer-builder separation, and it was basically about, okay, we want validators and nodes to stay completely decentralized and not have to be sophisticated to win money. So what we're going to do is like we are going to create a new category of nodes, and those are like called builders. And the builders will be very specialized into making very valuable blocks, so validators don't have to. And then how it works today on Ethereum is a bit complicated, but it works. Basically, you have the builders that like are very specialized and sophisticated, and they build very valuable blocks. And then there's an auction, and every block, validators just have to pick the blocks built by builders that have generated the most value. And so it's kind of nice because validators can just still get access to the very highest value blocks, but without getting centralized themselves because they rely on the builders. And it's all mediated via an auction that's run by third parties that are called relays. For those that know where we are going, that's going to actually be trustless in one of the next upgrade, but yeah, that's how it's done. The problem we have right now is that I think people slightly underestimated how much centralization will happen on the builder level. And so now, so what worked is like we still have a very decentralized validator set, so that's great. Like that was like the whole purpose of it. But we have a super centralized builder set with like 2-3 builders basically building more than 90% of all blocks on Ethereum, which is kind of crazy. And so you might say, well, that was sort of expected and everything, but like the problem we have now is censorship resistance. Because if you just have like 2-3 like entities basically building most of the blocks on Ethereum, you know, if those 3 guys like collude and decide they don't want to include some transactions on the network, we have a problem because those transactions will have to wait until there is like a smaller builder or like a local builder that altruistically wants to include that transaction, but like otherwise, you know, that causes a huge delay for some transactions while others just like get included in the next block, and so there's sort of like a weird unfairness discrimination between transactions, and that's an issue. And we have seen this before. There was, you know, OFAC sanctions for Tornado Cash earlier, you know, a year or 2 ago, and some builders just like chose they wanted to protect themselves from risks, and so they excluded these transactions, and those transactions had like huge delays. And so, yeah, we'll see it's not just about regulatory risks, but like generally we don't want that to happen. And so what should we do? Yeah, that's what I say, basically. Yeah, to solve this, there is a proposal that's called FOSIL that I'm championing. It's an EIP, and it's called Fork Choice Enforced Inclusion Lists. And the idea is very, very simple. It's, you know, if you remember, we have this very decentralized validator set and this very centralized builder set. The concept is very easy. It's just like you use the decentralized set of validators to put very hard constraints on builders. And so how this works is like, yeah, maybe I'll stay with this picture for now. You have the validators, and every slot, they send lists of transactions of what they see in the public mempool. And they're like, OK, this is what I saw. And the builders have to include the union of all these transactions into their blocks. Otherwise, the block is not considered valid. So it's like you use like 16 every slot of the decentralized validators guy to put constraints on the builders and force them to include stuff. Otherwise, their block is just like not voted on, so it will never become canonical on chain, basically. Yeah, that's how it actually works. But like, yeah, diagram is maybe a bit too complicated. But like, you have the 16 guys that are part of the decentralized validator set. They send lists of transactions they build from the public mempool, and the builder basically does a union across all these lists, and he has to include them in the block so that everyone votes for the block. Yeah, so that's how it works. I don't know if we take questions during the talk, but I hope it was clear. If anyone has a question, let me know.
Yeah, let's take some questions.
OK.
Any questions about Block Builder? I have questions.
Yeah. Oh, you do?
Yeah, I do. So who are these 2 to 3 entities, and which jurisdictions are they in?
The what?
The
builders? Yeah, they are mostly... So, yeah, the market structure is a bit weird, but you actually have many actors. You have builders, and then you have searchers. The builders are like either very connected to trading firms or specialized entities. And right now, they are located in the US and in the UK. Yeah, and they are, you know, very much in touch with what we call searchers, and searchers are like very specialized, even more specialized entities trying to like find opportunities on chain to do arbitrage or sandwiches or stuff like this, and they build bundles of transactions that they send to builders, and that's how they construct like the valuable blocks. But yeah, the problem is more like, yeah, they are all located in like similar locations, and there are really not that many of them. So it will be very easy for someone to go and bribe the 3 of them, because like they are very dominant builders in the Ethereum world, but like they are still quite small companies. It's not like they are huge megacorps that are like very hard to bribe. It's quite easy. Yeah.
Thank you for the talk, and thank you for championing. Oh, you want to continue? Or?
Yes,
Oh,
yes.
great.
So to be clear, the talk is not over. I was just like making sure everyone got the idea, but yeah.
No, I just want to thanks for championing the fossil. I'm a big fan, and I remember it was supposed to be included in the last fork, but
right.
And I don't remember exactly what was the counter argument. I just want to open that.
Yeah, so yeah, I was going to mention this, but yes, it was supposed to be included in the last port. Ethereum governance is very long and sort of complicated. The main pushback was fork scope. So we are trying to push to a new rhythm of 2 forks a year, which was very much not the case before. It was more like 1 fork a year. And so under this new sort of meta, Fossil was pushed out of the last fork with priority given into the next, just because it was too packed of a fork and we didn't want to include too many big EIPs into one. But it wasn't for any sort of technical reasons. It was just more hey, we have to make choices, and right now we'd rather delay it basically. Okay. So yeah, I thought I would give a couple of examples why censorship resistance matter, for if it's not obvious. First, what I care about, maybe you guys don't as much, but it's really important for the future of the protocol because we want to scale DL1 drastically. I think the goal is 100 to 1,000x. And the more we scale, the more reliance we have on these builders. So because we ask them to just do more. We also want to switch to ZK VMs. And so not only do you have to build the block, but you have to prove the block. And those are, need GPUs and sort of more resources and everything. So if we don't put constraints on the builders, they will keep sort of having more importance. And the centralization forces exist. So we don't want to over-rely on builders, knowing that we will ask them to do more in the future. So Fossil helps a lot for this. And then, having special rules for some nodes that do inclusion, some other nodes that do proposal and voting, actually allows you to nicely separate roles and duties within the protocol, and it's very important for the rest of the protocol, basically. Yeah, institutions. So at DevConnect, there was quite a lot of discussions around institutions, and I think today too. What institutions really don't like is counterparty risks. So, if your competitor can just go and see those 3 builders and bribe them and delay your transactions by 10x, that's just a risk institutions are not really okay with. So it's very important to prevent this from happening. Market manipulation is also a big one. If you can censor transactions, why wouldn't you censor all buy orders on a given token and buy it yourself? You could actually do that. Institutions don't love that either. It actually improves UX for L2s a lot because a lot of L2s rely on fraud proofs still. It's very important for them to be able to submit that first sort of challenge on the L1. And if they can't, or if someone censored them, it's actually very critical for the whole liquidity TVL of an L2. So that's why they have 7-day windows right now, and it could actually be shortened by a ton, which improves UX for everyone. They could also reuse Fossil on their infrastructure to improve their forced inclusion mechanisms, which is nice. And yeah, for users, you have tons of use cases, but whether you vote for your favorite DAO or you buy a coffee, you just don't want anyone to be able to arbitrarily just delay your transactions by 10x, making the UX just much more worse. There is some also kind of funny, well, not so funny if it happens to you, but use cases. For example, if someone prevents you from having a transaction that tops up your collateral on Aave to liquidate you after, that's there's a very clear incentive to do that. And so that can also happen with censorship resistance, which is, I guess, not great. The why now for Fossil is, yeah, I think we are, so I don't know, some might disagree, but I do think we are in a sort of like nice regulatory sort of like period, I guess. And I don't think it will be wise to wait too long. Right now, we don't see a lot of censorship on the network, and it's why it's like a really good, perfect time to ship some of the things, because once there is censorship, the pushbacks to even include these sort of like forks will be just like much harder. So I think like, yeah, these years are like really good for censorship resistance, for privacy, and we should just like go and push things while we can. Yeah, those are like technicalities, I guess, but like Fossil is like one of the most ready EIPs ever. It's not even like scheduled for inclusion, and it's already like interoperable within 8 clients on DevNet, which is a lot. And there were 2 hearts there. I don't know why they are not there yet, but yeah, there is like a lot of community support. Like I do feel like Ethereum is understanding how important censorship resistance is, and I mean, given the narrative around Ethereum, like we are supposed to be the most secure, censorship-resistant, permissionless chain. We need to be still, pioneering this sort of like designs and keep keep evolving on that front. Yeah, just because we should. Yeah, what's next? Okay, a lot of emojis are weird, but censorship resistance for blobs. It's another type of transaction that's not covered by Fossil, and it's very important to have CR for that too. For MEV transactions, ZK Fossil is kind of cool. It's more like a research, in the research phase right now, but it's basically when you are like one of the includers, so one of the people that build inclusion lists, ZK Fossil lets you break the link between who included a list and what's in that list. So it protects like people that make those lists from regulation, or sort of like people that will look at the lists and be like, oh, you actually submitted that list we didn't want you to submit, so it's kind of nice. And then, yeah, we also need to find great mechanisms for liveness guarantees, because an easy way to censor all transactions is just like not to submit any block to the network, but that hurts the protocol a lot. So yeah, thank you.